Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our third in a four-part webinar series where we are tackling the implications of professional licensing for condominium corporations. And as we're talking about today, this includes self-managed condominiums. My name is Anand Sharma. I'm a condominium manager by trade and in my professional capacity. I'm also the president of the Canadian Condominium Institute, North Alberta chapter, and the chair of the Alberta Condominium Management Education Consortium, or ACMEC. ACMEC is a Canadian not-for-profit joint venture between CCI North Alberta, CCI South Alberta, as well as our partners at the Alberta Real Estate Association. So we are a partnership of those three organizations. ACMEC was created to offer high-quality condominium management education for industry professionals by industry professionals. We acknowledge that Alberta is the traditional and ancestral territory of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, and express gratitude for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who've gone before us. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and pledge to address systemic racism. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Alberta Real Estate Foundation for their very generous grant that enables us to deliver this series without charging. For more information on the work that ARIF does, please visit their website at arif.ab.ca. For those of us in the Alberta condominium community, the implementation of condominium manager licensing has generated a lot of questions and caused uncertainty. This webinar series was developed to be a resource to condo boards, managers, and owners. We are hosting experienced subject matter experts who provide their insights about what licensing means for the condominium community, answering arising questions, and inspire uncertainty in a newly licensed industry. So we're very grateful to have them. If you would like to see what we are discussing today, as well as the previous two seminars, please do go to our website, acmec.ca, and register as well for our next very interesting event on the Rika disciplinary process on August 30th at noon. So a couple of housekeeping items for everybody on this call. Audience cameras are off and microphones muted unless prompted by the host. Please type your questions in the Q&A panel and keep all the chatter polite. Questions will be answered at the live Q&A following the presentation. So please use that Q&A and not the chat function. I have done that before, so let's keep it there. We are recording this webinar and we will share the recording link with all participants. We'll also be sharing this recording and all the others in this webinar series on the ACMEC website. Again, that's acmec.ca, acmec.ca, so they can be accessed in the future. So don't worry, you will have access to the information. So with that, I'd like to introduce this session. We are pleased to bring two experts and my colleagues and friends who are both condominium managers here in Edmonton and are board members of our CCI North Alberta team. Over the next hour, Sandy Danielson and Darcy Lee Ray are walking us through the distinction between licensed and unlicensed activity and where you can go for resources to assist with management activity on licensing. Before we get started, let me share a little bit about our presenters, and I could go on and on, but I'm going to keep it brief. Sandy is a condominium manager and the owner of Prince Property Inc. She has been a condominium manager for the last 14 years. Over the last 9 years, she has been an active volunteer on the board of directors of CCI North Alberta. Sandy has a great interest in working with clients by providing accurate information to condo owners regarding the Act and bylaws, to increase awareness of CCI and a champion of that, and help show us how to run a corporation so that it can be the best that it can be. Darcy Lee Ray is a condominium manager who began working in the industry in 2008 and transitioned to owning and operating Hallmark Management in 2013. At Hallmark Management, they view their association with clients as a partnership in which they will both always act professionally and together for the enhancement of your condominium. With that, I'll hand over the reins to Sandy and Darcy Lee to take it away.
We do need the next slide, the first slide. Things to know about self-managed condos. Next slide. Actually, the next one. Yes, thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. I'm glad that you have joined us, and we hope we can add to your already knowledge. And if you've got any questions at the end, as Anand mentioned, you can just put them in that Q&A. So the agenda for this lunchtime is governance, administration, maintenance, communication, privacy, and confidentiality. And we'll finish up with self-management or professional management, what is best for your condo. Next slide, governance. Governance includes all things related to compliance, laws, including owner and corporation responsibilities. So what is our mission as a board of directors? I'm going to just read this right off because you can't really summarize it. And the people that helped us put this presentation together said, if we're showing it, we better read it. So that's what I'm going to do. So your bylaws are set out, they set out the rules governing the use of the units and the common property, and the rules governing how the corporation will be managed and administered. They form a contract between the condominium corporation and the unit owners, and between each unit owner and all other unit owners. The purpose of the bylaw is to provide peace, comfort, security, and health and safety for all occupants. The other purpose of the bylaw is to maintain the units and the common property in such a manner so as to preserve property values. Also to develop a sense of community. Bylaws just hang tight. Can you back up one more? Thank you. Thanks, Beverly. Directors are responsible to enforce the bylaws. Directors should also set an example in the community. The other piece around the bylaws is that board of directors need to establish the limits of their responsibilities and also their authority. Next slide. Thanks. So what is your role as a director? You have an obligation to act fairly and reasonably. You also have an obligation, I'm using those words because that is what it is, to act honestly and in good faith. You also have an obligation to act ethically. At all times, you need to exercise care, due diligence, that any prudent person would. If, as a director, you do not meet your obligations or standard of conduct, you may find decisions can be overturned by the ownership, and you really don't want that to happen. When in doubt of what to do, you should always reach out to some experts, lawyers, engineers. That's just a small piece of it. Okay, next slide, Beverly. How do we set policies? Yeah, you can just pull that all up. Thank you. Bylaws are regulations set to control the actions of owners. Policies provide details of these regulations. So the examples are on the slides here. So pets are permitted in your bylaw. So then now the policy is going to say, well, how many pets? What kind of pet, size, etc. Policies are intended to improve how a community functions. They should be clear and concise. They, of course, must not conflict the bylaw or the Condo Property Act. And they must be consistently enforced. Just because you're on the board and your bylaws or policies say your pet must be on a leash when you have it on common property. Just because you're on the board doesn't mean you don't need to follow that, or your friend or family or whatever. So it's really important that the board sets an example, but that policies are consistently enforced. One thing policies help directors quickly respond to changing needs of a community. Bylaws take process. Owners have to respond to it. They take a long time to change, but policies, you can make a plan, you deliver them to the owners, and within 30 days, they can be in effect. Also in emergency situations, that would be like safety or security, the 30-day time frame is not required. Next slide. What legislation and documents do we need to follow? So we start at the top of the pyramid. Common law. So this is law that's not written down, but it's based on past decisions from the court. The next, you have your Condominium Act and regulations, which that is set up by Service Alberta, and anybody that owns, develops, manages a condo property have to follow those, the act and regulations. Condominium plan determines, that's done by the developer builder. It determines the size of the unit, common property, exclusive use areas, parking stalls, unit factors, square footage. So you have a lot of information on that, but that governs how the corporation operates. Next, you've got your bylaws, and the bylaws are dictated by the owners. Directors can't change the bylaws. You need to have 75% of unit owners plus 75% unit factors to make changes in the bylaws, which segues into our rules and policies that we've discussed somewhat. That's why it's a good idea to have policies with more details, because board directors can make those changes and they can be enforceable in the 30-day piece. Condominium board of directors, they are elected, nominated by ownership. And the best practice is to sign a code of ethics. And then our last piece here is condominium owners, which need to follow the bylaws and all the rules right to the top of the pyramid. And I think it's really important that you have active owners, that they would participate in AGMs, respond to emails. It makes the board of directors, makes the corporation all run smoother. The other couple of legislation which isn't on a slide, so just you can stay here on this slide, Beverly, is that we have, just to mention a couple of other ones, is human rights. You've got disabilities, handicap residents, emotional support dogs. So those pieces, as a board of directors, you have to make good decisions. Always err on the side of the human rights, so that doesn't put you in a space that you don't want to be. And of course, the Privacy Act, PIPA. You have to be certain that you protect individuals' personal information. And that's next slide. And what is a condominium plan? So, and if you want to guess, we've got the legend that comes up there. It's got the date stamp when it was incorporated. It provides the unit factor schedule if you want to pop that up as well, Beverly. Yeah, the date stamp and then the unit factors. Thank you. It also shows out whether it's a conventional corporation or if it's a bare land. All your information is on there. You need to go to that for most things when if you've got any discrepancies on common property, etc. That I'm going to turn that over to you, Darcy, for the administration piece.
Darcy, you're muted.
Hey, yeah.
Sorry, guys. There we go. All right, administration. We can move to the next slide there. So what are our administrative obligations as a self-managed condo? Well, first of all, In order to effectively manage your condo, you do need to know who are members of your condominium corporation, i.e. your owners. If you don't have a concise, complete list of that, you can research those titles at Land Titles. They will give you the owner's name and their address for service, which is a good place to start. You can obtain those titles quite easily online at the SPIN2 website. Some of your other obligations, first and foremost, is you need to register your board of directors every AGM as they change, and any time throughout the year as a board member comes and goes, or perhaps they change their address, you need to register those documents at Land Titles. You also need to make sure your address for service is accurate at Land Titles. Being self-managed, you've likely been that way for quite some time. There could have been a secretary some years past that registered your address for service. If that person has since moved on, you may have an outdated address for service at Land Titles. Another option self-managed boards sometimes opt for is renting a commercial mailbox and using that as your ongoing address for service and receiving your mail there. You need to ensure that all of your bylaw changes are registered at Land Titles. It's not enough to rewrite your bylaws, go through the agony of the vote, reach the double threshold, and boom, you've got new bylaws, only to go to Land Titles and realize you missed a step and you didn't register them. So anything you do to change your bylaws, whether it's single bylaws or a full rewrite, they need to be registered at Land Titles. Board of Directors meetings. How do we run an effective Board of Directors meeting? Well, we're going to start by planning. And to that end, you're going to send out your agenda and meeting package 1 week in advance. The preparation is during that week in advance. The board members should be expected to review all material sent to them and come to the board meeting with discussion points in hand so that resolutions can be made and you can have action items. In your meeting package, just go back one more slide, Bev. Yeah. In the meeting package, you're going to provide to them the agenda, the previous meeting minutes, financial report for the month, quotes and proposals that you might want them to review, officers and committee reports, and correspondence you may have received from your owners or other sources. Once the meeting concludes, the secretary is going to prepare the minutes and within 1 week, provide them to the board members with task items noted. And then you're going to publish the minutes once they're approved at the next board meeting, and publishing means sending them out to the owners in whatever format you typically do that. Next slide. So that was board meetings. Now, what are our requirements for the AGMs? Well, first you have to pick a date, time, and a venue. Once you have that, you send out a save the date right away, and that can be weeks, months in advance. The meat and potatoes package that goes out, the minimum that notice you have to give is 14 days. Being mindful of your delivery methods. If you're sending it, if you're still bound to Canada Post for some owners, then you need to add 7 days. And you've got a 21 day in advance that you have to have your meeting package complete and ready to go in the mail. If you're emailing, you need to hit send a minimum of 15 days before the AGM. And if you're delivering by hand, you can deliver 14 days in advance. However, best practice would be to start that process about the same time you would have mailing packages, because hand delivery means hand to hand, not in a mailbox or under the door. You can leave it with an adult in the unit. It doesn't necessarily have to be to the unit owner, but you may have trouble finding somebody home on that 14th day. So you want to start that process a little earlier. And what are we going to accomplish at each AGM? So you're going to approve the minutes from the previous AGM. You're going to provide the annual reserve fund report of the board. You're going to present the annual financial statements, or you can ask your auditor to come. Most of them will, and present for you. You're going to appoint the auditors for the coming year. You're going to report on old business, and you're going to review new business. You're going to provide a time for owner Q&A. You may have some new owners, and they may be first-time condo owners. So you want to give time for them to come with their questions and questions from your existing owners. And then you're going to elect a board. To do that, you're going to check your bylaws and check for term lengths for your board members, as well as any election rules that your bylaws stipulate. And finally, once the meeting is concluded, you're going to again have the secretary draft your minutes. Best practice would be to send them around to the board, have a quick glance for errors and omissions, typos, formatting errors, button all that up, get that sorted out, and then they must go out to the ownership within 60 days of the AGM, where they sit in draft form until next year. Next slide. So what other documents should owners receive throughout the year besides the ones in the AGM package? Well, there are a few that you are compelled to do. Number one is the annual certificate of insurance that must go out to the owners within 30 days of renewal. And it must include a coverage letter that explains the difference from one policy to the next, from last term to this term. Sometimes it's nothing and sometimes it's big, like we have experienced the last number of years with deductibles rising. At any time in the year, if your broker comes to you and says the underwriters are changing something, you need to also disclose that to your owners within 30 days. I would encourage you not to wait the 30 days. Generally, when your policy renews, you will get your certificate of insurance from your broker within a few days. It's at that point that you send it out, especially if there are major changes. You have to give your ownership time to adjust their policies and get their coverage in place. Yeah, your financial statements, your audit or your review engagement, those have to go out annually and generally in the year-end or the AGM package. Reserve fund documents that the owners are entitled to are the 5-year reserve fund study in its entirety. I have seen boards that decide that's too much money to print and send. We're just going to send the money pages, the spreadsheets. And, you know, those probably are the key things people look at, but they are entitled to the entire document. With that, they get the 5-year funding plan, which the board will be updating annually, and the annual reserve fund report of the board, which again, they get at the AGM. But keep in mind that if your AGM is postponed, like we have experienced in the past through COVID, a good practice would be to send the package anyway. All through COVID, we had some that were just, maybe they missed 2 years. So we would do up the package as though we were holding the AGM and send all the material out in writing to the owners to keep them updated, let them know the board is still on top of it and looking after their investment. Optional things that you can send out to keep your owners engaged is the minutes, like we talked about through the year. Once they're approved, at the following board meeting, publish them out to the owners. Reminders such as insurance, open windows in the winter, maybe rules that are a challenge to some of your owners to follow, like, you know, don't park in visitor parking, that kind of stuff. Updates, industry changes, legislative changes, everything that will affect the owners. Anything you can do to keep your owners engaged. The more communication you give them, the more they feel they're a part of the whole process. I often get questions, what can the board charge for these documents? Some of them are lengthy and they can be costly if you're doing them in paper. Section 2053 of the regulations does set out a fee schedule for documents. However, the ones that owners are entitled to and you're compelled to give them, you can't charge them for that. However, if they don't do their due diligence and take those documents you've got, tuck them away safely so they can use them later and lose them, then they want to sell their place and they come to you looking for a document package, there are fees in the schedule that you can charge for those. Next slide. Insurance. We just want to mention briefly, insurance is a massive topic, takes on a whole life of its own. What I do want to make sure that everybody understands here is that that certificate of insurance disclosure is not just mandatory, but you need to do that. And you need to do it several times a year, putting it in front of people to make sure that they're properly covered. Sometimes they'll get it, look at it, go, oh, that's great. I don't know what to do with that. And they file it. And you need to include a cover letter telling them what to do with it and be explicit. You want to take your certificate of insurance, your standard insurable unit definition, and your bylaws, make an appointment with your broker, go sit down, make sure you have adequate coverage. It is vitally important. Next slide. Financial obligations. What is the board obligated to do financially? Well, you're going to report monthly to the owners. That can be done through the minutes when you send them out every month. And you're going to report annually on the financial position at the AGM. Through the year, you're going to act honestly and in good faith as a prudent person would to protect the finances of the corporation. To that end, you can do things like obtaining multiple quotes, engage professionals when required. And all of this will help you keep track of the finances and protect them at all costs. Next slide, Sandy, over to you.
Okay. Next slide, Beverly. Why is maintenance important? It is an obligation on the corporation and board of directors to maintain and repair the common property. You also have an obligation to follow the reserve fund study. To be noted, it's a guideline for capital expenses, but if you vary from that study, you need to have a good reason why. If you've moved maintenance up, because cost will be best if you do it in one place as opposed to in two phases. But you need to have a good reason so that if an owner comes and asks that question, that you have an answer for it. It's important that you would always contribute monthly to your reserve account so that you do have money. What we have found is that deferred maintenance often equals to a special levy. And no owner or even directors like to even think about having that to happen. But if you are always just deferring your maintenance, down the road, you're going to find that it's going to catch up with you at some point. The leak isn't going to go away. It's probably going to get bigger if you just, patch it and defer it. One thing that you have to remember too is that a corporation must do the repair to common property, whether you have sufficient funds or not. It's not an option, like no exception. You'd have to call for a special levy or perhaps take a loan. There's a few things that you would have to do on that, but it's definitely an obligation that you're responsible to maintain and repair the common property. Next slide. So how do you know what needs your attention? So regular maintenance. So these are items that would be in your yearly calendar. They would be in your yearly budget. Items like carpet cleaning, fire hydrant inspections, janitorial services, pest control like mouse bait boxes if you're in a townhome, eaves cleaning, parking lot or parkade sweeps, tree trimming. Those are things that would just be regular maintenance. It's probably many more depending on elevator servicing is regular maintenance. Those would be things that you would just do. It's just like you get up and brush your teeth in the morning. It's something that gets done every year at some point on your calendar. Walkabouts, we always recommend a spring walkabout so that if there's things that are noted, you can take care of it during the warmer months here. Some condos that you do like a spring and a fall. You're going to note your concerns. Very many things maybe haven't even been brought up except that you're seeing it on a walkabout. You're going to put it on an action list to plan for repair. Proactive repair as opposed to reactive is always the best. The other piece is checklists. For me, you should have like a checklist that includes all pieces of your common property, like your windows, your doors, your balconies, railings, your asphalt. You know, yeah, you should have a big checklist that you would go through it yearly and make note of it. And again, using your reserve fund study, that'll tell you kind of what time is expecting life remains on these items, and put that together with a plan for maintenance. The other piece is call the experts. As a condo manager, we call the experts because we just don't know everything about everything. You would look at a reserve fund provider, insurance providers, appraisals. Just keep in mind you need to get an appraisal every year. That's most important. Snow removal, safety and security systems, energy conservation providers, just to get best prices on that. Safety inspections for your elevators, chair lifts, that sort of thing. And I know you always need lawyers and engineers to reach out at some point. Next slide. How do we prepare a contract? So how do we make it legal? So any contract that is signed by both parties, you agree to the offer and it's accepted by the other party, that's what makes it legal. To develop a scope of work, you need to include what needs to be done. Other permits need to be required. Timeline, start and completion date. Do we need to have parking arranged? What will be the hours of work? Do we need a porta-john? Of course, keep in mind. So those things, I think mostly you would have inside your contract. All those details, that would be important. You maybe want to get a progress report from this project. A payment plan. And then, of course, don't forget you'd need to notify the owners on, okay, there's going to be a boom lift. We're doing the stucco and it'll be starting on the north side of the building. So you might keep your blinds closed. So you want to totally make sure owners know what's going on. And if you can give a window of time, of course, weather permitting, you're never sure, but from August the 1st to August the 14th, this is what's going to be happening. So you really want to keep owners informed. The more communication, I think, directors have with owners, you get better participation and just more positive feedback. I think that's kind of all I have on that piece. And I'll turn it over to you, Darcy.
Thanks, Sandy. Communication, privacy, and how do we communicate effectively? So written communication, whether it be a written newsletter, a digital platform, and publishing the minutes, they're all great ways to communicate with your owners. And the reason we want to do that is we want to keep them engaged. You don't want to be that condo where nobody ever hears from the board, nobody ever hears from the management company. You want to keep them engaged. It gives them a sense of, oh, somebody is looking out for our place. And you want to use positive language when you're communicating, more so than just all of the hammer and sledgehammer, don't. So what I find effective is I'll use things like, did you know a really great condominium neighbor doesn't overwater their plants on their balcony, watering their neighbors below? Or did you know a really great condominium owner is respectful of the bylaws and doesn't park in visitor parking overnight? So small things like that, put it in front of them a few times, they might twig on. Use welcome packages for new owners and tenants. You can include in there things that you may have specific things in your condo that people always are looking for. Maybe a gate on a ground floor patio, and you've sourced a company and you've got a style and that's approved, and you could have a form in there. If they want to do that, it's already approved, they can go do it. You can hold informational meetings and social events. Information meetings could be for next year, we're thinking about XYZ project, and we've got a couple of options, and we want to take the temperature of our owners and see what tolerance is there for it and what they prefer. Social events, it's not enough to book the venue and order the pizza, but the board members need to show up. You need to mingle, you need to talk to your owners. Informal communications, on your, like Sandy said, the walkabouts, engage people. If you're out doing a walkabout and somebody's on their patio or in their yard, let them know what you're doing. Maybe ask their opinion on a few things, see if they have anything they'd like to report. They probably have a vantage point you don't see all the time if you're living on the other side of the property, and they are seeing their side every day. So they could have value to bring to your walkabout. And just be accessible and welcoming when you're in the hallway or on the property. Doesn't mean you have to, you know, dart down to the garbage room and hope you don't run into anybody because you don't have time to take down all their complaints and concerns. When you meet them, you can say to them, you know what, that's really great. I would really like you to put it in writing and send it to our email address, or put it in our suggestion box or question bin, whatever you use at your condo. But you should still be, hi Joe, and talk to them. Make sure they feel like somebody is there that can listen. In whatever form of communication you engage your owners, and for whatever reason, you must treat everybody equally and with respect and dignity at all times. We all know a complaint comes to the table and there is this side and this side, and then your job is to find the middle ground where the truth lies and where the resolution can be found. So you're going to find that middle ground, you're going to research a workable solution and present it to both sides. And if that fails, they can try mediation if it's a large enough issue. Next slide. What are our obligations for privacy and confidentiality? They are fairly substantial. So while carrying out your role as a board of directors, you have to comply with the Act and the bylaws and all the other laws of the province and the country regarding human rights and PIPA. And remember that your condo bylaws are not a suggestion. They are the laws that govern your corporation, and they must be applied equally to everyone. You need to have a privacy policy, which will set out what you collect, how you collect it, how long you keep it, who has access to it. And you need a privacy officer to oversee compliance and address any concerns that are raised. Privacy and confidentiality at the board level must be upheld at all times. Board members must talk to their neighbors as neighbors about neighborly things. Board business is confidential until it's published in the minutes. And even at that, some of the aspects of how the board arrived at their decisions should be kept confidential. For an example, large project, lots of money outlay. Some people are opposed to it, some are not, but they want to see the rest of the quotes. They don't believe you got enough quotes. No, you don't want to. That's board level information. Your contractors gave you those quotes in confidence, and you need to keep those private. If they need to see that level of that depth of information, they need to get on the board. And how do we collect this private information? Well, if you have somebody that is skeptical and pushing back and says, I'm not giving you my information, you can let them know that this is what they can do. So first of all, owners need to consent to the collection of this information. The info is collected only for the purpose for which it is required. For example, in your condo, all you really need to know is the owner's name, address, phone number, email, their car or truck vehicle information, pet information if they have pets, other occupants that live with them, and their banking information if you're collecting fees through pre-authorized debit. Individuals are allowed to access their information to check for accuracy. And individuals can challenge you if they feel you're asking something that is a little offside. For example, why do you need to know my occupation? It has nothing to do with my ownership in this condo. And they would be right. Info can be kept only as long as indicated in Schedule 3. So, for example, common property lease agreements for parking stalls or storage cages or whatever you may have, 3 years. If you're collecting rental deposits from owners, those tenant names and deposit amounts, 3 years. And the proxy forms submitted at your AGM are 180 days that you must keep them from the date they were supplied. With privacy and confidentiality, the board has to give considerable thought to how they're protecting that information. If you're collecting it in paper form, where are you storing it? How are you securing it? Is it in a fire safe cabinet, lockable cabinet? Do you have a security system? If you're collecting it digitally, you need to give thought to your internet security and firewalls and such. You need to have a really good defense system there, especially because you are housing people's private banking information. And that is on to our last segment, self-management versus professional management. When and why would a board consider transitioning to professional management? Well, this is where some of the licensing will come in. So if you're self-managed, you don't need to be licensed. You don't need to have somebody with a condominium management license unless they are engaging in licensed activity. Just to boil it down briefly, unlicensed activity means you would have a site manager, you could call them that, but really they would be in a custodial capacity. They would not be advising the board, interpreting bylaws, collecting fees, all of that stuff. That is all licensed activity. So anybody that is an on-site person that basically takes care of the physical property, that is what you can do as an unlicensed condo. Sandy, do you have anything to add?
No, that's good. That's good on that piece.
And when should we consider professional management? Well, a couple of things could trigger you to do that. One of the biggest ones we see is the people side of things. You've been self-managed, you've probably been that way for a long time. And you get the privilege of learning a lot of the nitty-gritty about your owners over the years. And perhaps you're done. You don't want to be in that capacity anymore, and you would like a buffer for that. Or you have nuisance or nonsense people who call multiple times a day in your home, bombarding you with board business. And again, you've been doing it for a while and you're done. You'd like a buffer for that. You'd just like to be an owner, unless you're in the board meeting. When you're professionally managed, your licensed manager is that buffer for you. They can field those calls, they can deal with them. And you can just be an owner, and when you're outside and you bump into somebody, you can talk to them as an owner about owner neighborly things. Sandy, you want to take the next one?
Is that, I'm sorry. Okay, she's got it here. Yeah, okay. So you might want to consider the age of your community. So a succession plan for board members. So if your community is all aging and there doesn't look like there's, anyone that's going to step up into a board position, you need to consider that, especially if perhaps you have some big projects, maybe special levies having to come in. You want to consider that someone's going to be able to handle that for you. I think Darcy, you mentioned kind of negotiating with owners. So I think you've brought that up already.
Yeah.
The other piece is, you've got contracts to review scope of work. You'd also have to budget for the cost of a management fee. And that sometimes takes time to put it in your budget. You maybe have to increase condo fees to allow that. I don't know, I think I kind of got a little note here that we want to allow some time for questions and answers. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Darcy?
No, I think we've got some time here. We should probably move on to the questions.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. We've got a few questions in the question box. Some of them are fairly similar. So maybe we'll tackle a couple things. So there's a question about whether when you're referring to policy, Sandy, is it the same as the rules? And building on that, there was a question related to that. Is there a difference? So do you want to address that?
Well, for me, policies and rules are pretty much the same. As far as I see it, and just because the slide said policies, that's really why I use the word policies, but I feel they're pretty much the same. If Darcy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, they're officially called rules now, so that is what they are.
Okay.
So you can actually probably do away with the word policy.
There we go. Right. So we had policies on our slide, so that's kind of why I use that word. So really just terminology.
Mm-hmm.
And the follow-up question is, do rules have to be voted on at each AGM to continue to be in effect?
No, the rules are set at the board level and they can be changed by board members. That's why we don't put some things in the bylaws. We leave it to rules because those are easily changed from board to board if the culture of the condo changes and you want to do things differently.
Yeah, and just to expand on that, the sanctions or the enforcement is non-monetary on rules. So I know why people use the word policy, because we're so used to use the word policy versus rules. I don't know why they put that in legislation, but we often use it interchangeably. But yes, references to rules. So okay, so that answers some of those questions. There was a question regarding bylaws, and I think to that person who posted that question around human rights, I would say we should reference that to one of our lawyers. And if you do come to our annual general meeting, we generally have a lawyer panel that gets into the nitty-gritty around human rights, and that's CCI, and very specific questions about language within bylaws related to human rights. So I don't know if the panelists want to tackle that question. I think that's probably better referred to that, or Dan, if we could take that away in our capacity as CCI and maybe send it to one of our amazing lawyer teams on that. There is a question related to comment about special assessment and it not being a bad thing, as some condo corporations use that as a tool versus high fees on a monthly basis. Any comments on that?
It's not always a bad thing. That is a strategy some boards employ, is that to insulate the condo fees, they will do a special levy, and it is welcomed by some owners. Usually I find because it does keep condo fees lower. So it's not always a negative thing. And sometimes you can't plan for them, and life just happens, so they have to happen. And the fact that you can levy it and collect it is a positive.
I agree as well. As long as the condo fees aren't too low, there's the other piece of that too.
Yeah. Every condominium corporation is different and the ownership is different, and some operate in different ways. So fair point. One tip that you could provide in the era of, I think some people would view as increased conflict between owners and boards and condo corporations, from both of you, was the request.
Well, say that again.
Any tips for the attendees related to what you would say in your professional capacity for condo corporations and boards, especially related to increases in conflict between boards and owners and amongst them?
Yeah, so when you've got conflicts with your owners, again, you're dealing with that one-on-one, and you're learning the nitty-gritty of it all and battling it out. With professional management, we bring a skill set to the table that will allow it for unbiased and calm negotiation with owners to try and reach that middle ground and find a workable solution. So we are not as invested and in the condo with the problem, so we can look at it from the outside and bring some experience from other situations, other condos, other fights that we've been a part of, and bring that to you.
And I think Darcy mentioned earlier too, is positive feedback, friendly, listen. Actually, listening is probably a really big piece to hear what they have to say. Often people just need to vent. And if you just offer that listening ear, that even calms people down as well.
I think what they actually said was, I may have mischaracterized the question. What is one thing that each of you would recommend that would improve condominium living in general? And they gave examples of social events, newsletters, better board members. So
barbecues, really. A lot of people do that, promotes community. And that's a really big thing. Owners meet other owners, and even though they maybe had conflict, they like, they end up working, 3 blocks from each other. And, you can just get it. It's a different look at people. I think those are really good things. Community events are big.
Yeah, community events, engagement, staying in front of your owners. Don't hide behind the boardroom table. That's the worst thing you can do.
Yes, it is.
Darcy, tougher question around privacy, just around what about emergency contact information? It's a requirement or not?
It's best practice. It's not a legal requirement, but any condo I manage, we do reach out and ask for that. And sometimes it takes a few incidents for people to realize, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Instead of the fireman knocking down my door and I have to fix it. If they had just known who to call or who had a key, then we could have avoided that. So best practice, absolutely. And you should always put that in front of your owners.
Really quickly, and a very open-ended question. What is a ballpark for professional management fees? I love that question.
How big is the ballpark? So it depends on your size, your complexity, what you want from us. Do you want full meal deal management? Do you just want help with collecting condo fees and chasing arrears? Do you just want some governance advice once in a while? So it is we could tell you anything from $15 a door to $75 a door. It just depends where you fit in the middle.
And related to privacy again, if one has a bare land condo association, must one have a privacy officer? Straightforward question.
Yes, if you're a condominium, you need a privacy officer.
Tougher question. Again, if number of dogs are under policies instead of bylaws, how can you enforce?
Well, number of dogs, if it's a policy, you can't really. It's supporting your bylaw. So I would assume your bylaw says dogs are approved.
Yeah.
If they don't say how many, you can't enforce it. So condos that just blatantly say, you know what, you can have animals, just register them. They do leave themselves wide open to a myriad of cats and dogs and lizards and birds and all that stuff. So your bylaws to some degree need to, but your bylaws can say a maximum of 2 pets, a dog, a cat, 2 cats, 2 dogs. And your policy can expand on that and say only orange cats and only red dogs of 14 inches high, or whatever you want to say.
So is the devil in the details a little bit when it comes to your bylaws? Because if your bylaws blanket allow boards to approve and not approve, then I think what was said in the PowerPoint was if you supplement that with your rules, it really is up to board discretion. So I think that's where I think it was Barbara who was kind of leading to that question. Do management companies use their set providers or do they get comparative quotes for work?
No, we have obviously got vendors that we work with that we know. We've personally, the ones that I use, some of them I use repeatedly because I have trained them. I've spent many years training them how I want my buildings treated, my people treated, and the reporting and the communication I expect. If I walk into a new condominium and they have vendors and trades that they love dearly as well, we'll work with those, of course. So you can certainly access the ones that professional management will bring you, but if you have your own in place, there is no need to rock that boat. If it's not broke, we don't fix it.
Yeah, same. We do the same thing.
Back to this question around, is there any guidance or guideline fees or guidance around fees on the standard rates that condo boards should know about before engaging a professional management company?
So I think before you even begin that discussion, you need to decide what you want from us. So my favorite thing is getting cold call emails or calls from a condo board. We're going to hire a new manager, give us a price. And that's all the information they give me. When I say to them, you know what, I really need to come and have a look. I need to see who's on the board. I need to have a chat with you and nail down what it is you need from me. And then I can give you a price. So your best advice I can give you is do a scope of work. Let us know exactly what you want from us, and then we can fire off a budget price to you.
In line with that, there was just a comment. We are the typical size of a self-managed condo that you. What is the typical size of a self-managed condo? They are a 6-owner condo building, and the amount of work is overwhelming. But I don't think we can afford to hire a professional manager. What advice do you have for us? 6-unit.
Those are very tough. Don't envy you. If you're going to go for full meal deal management, the hard truth is that you are still a condo. You have a set of books, you have a set of owners, you have a set of problems that need to be dealt with. 6 owners versus 16 or 18 or 25 is not a whole lot more work. So you are in a very tough place when it comes to that. For those small properties, though, I encourage you to maybe phase in management. You've been doing it for so long, you know what you like doing, you know what you don't like doing. Offload what is onerous to you, and maybe do a version of management and not full management to start with.
Corey, we got a few questions here, so I'm going to keep, we might go a little over the time just to get to as many. Corey has asked a couple times, does Rika regulate self-management? So maybe if you could expand a little bit about self-management and the real estate council. And it comes down to this licensing versus unlicensed activity.
You want that one, Sandy?
Yeah, I don't know if I do.
Okay. So my understanding is that,
Yeah.
like I said before, if you're self-managed, you do not need a license unless you have a person guiding you with governance, finances, that sort of stuff. If they're acting in just a custodial role, taking care of the physical property, so you don't need to have somebody licensed. But if you have somebody that is taking that on and is guiding you and doing all the other licensed activity, they should be licensed, yes.
And there was an attendee who was kind of saying, I'm curious as to why you feel a general manager for a self-directed condo can advise or interpret bylaws, etc. So
That
kind of
is
tapping into that.
Yeah, well, that's part of what licensing is, and those are the laws that Rika have, that we have to follow as licensed managers. You need to be licensed to do that sort of work. And that is not my rule. That's the new licensing rules.
Kathy also talks about if she just wanted to clarify that a self-managed board with a manager, that the manager is not allowed to handle funds.
Well, if you're self-managed, I mean, you can collect condo fees, but they can't advise you on investments. They can't. It's a real gray, blurry area. And what is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough. There is we may want to circulate the real estate council. I know has some communication on what's licensed versus unlicensed activity. I know that this was a decision made at the higher level with Service Alberta as to why certain aspects were excluded. But I mean, it is a concern because if you're handling some of the same activities that a licensed manager is supposed to be doing, why would you exclude exclude that. I mean, the purpose of the real estate council is to protect consumers and to protect in their interest, right? So I think there is some gray area, but we may want to circulate that as well in terms of that information.
Because as self-managed, no matter what size you are as important as the people that are professionally managed. So in my mind, Rika missed the boat a little bit, in that there should have been some form of education or licensing or something for self-managed to make sure that there is oversight, to make sure that you people are protected and your finances are protected. Because without licensing, it's kind of still the Wild West for self-managed.
Yeah, I don't think that was a Rika decision, though. At the end of the day, I think that was a decision made at a higher level, and they're forced to kind of deal with it. So, a couple more questions that we'll quickly go through. That the previous webinar said that rules were to be approved at the AGM after approval by the board of directors. True or false?
False. They're just approved by the board.
Yeah.
And then you have to send them out to the owners and get
30 days in
later
advance.
30 days. Written notice, right? Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple of questions from Self-Managed. So we are Self-Managed and Bearland. Our condo plan shows Bearland. However, our bylaws say the corporation covers everything outside. If we don't increase our fees to cover all these expenses, we vote for a special levy for all work that needs to be done starting in 2035. Do we need to indicate that when a unit is sold now? Don't quite understand the question. They're talking about the reserve plan.
Sounds like it.
So you're talking about, you've got things that need to get done, you're going to defer them to 2035, and you're just not going to think about it till then, and you might do a special levy. Not a great strategy. Deferring work, and lots of things will change between now and 2035. So
I would say the CCI offers a lot of courses and content around self-managed boards and Bearland condominiums and managed property, and that concept, which we didn't really touch on today. So I'd encourage you to check out our website. There is our board basics course, which does go through some of these concepts as well. But yeah, managed property and Bearland is another thing to touch on. We can't do it in an hour. So okay. I think with those questions and seeing that it's 1:03, maybe we'll take one more question. Will self-managed in the future need to be licensed? Open-ended question.
your crystal ball, Anna.
Right.
I think TBD. I think if the idea is to protect the consumer from fraudulent activity and to take away any of those kinds of nefarious things, you've got to cover off all types of management. And I understand why the government excluded this, because I mean, it would be very onerous. So they have to find that balance. I don't know if the balance has been found yet. Certainly, I think now that we are licensed, there is a greater assurity that none of those kinds of activities are happening, and that professionalism has been added to our industry. So a lot of positives, whether that extends to self-managed condominiums, I think we're still learning, and there may be changes in the future. I'm not sure though. Okay. I think we are ready to wrap it up. So thank you so very much to both Sandy and Darcy Lee for your very informative session. I think we all learned a lot, and a lot for self-managed condominiums to know as they move forward. We appreciated your questions and like to again thank our presenters. A reminder that this recording of this session will be posted, and you'll receive the link via email along with copies of our resources. Again, thank you to the Alberta Real Estate Foundation for their ongoing support in allowing us to present this free of cost. And join us on the 30th for our last in the 4-part session of the summer webinar series. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. All right, have a great afternoon, and we'll talk next session.